A simple, strong melody is better than a complex, weak one. If you need to simplify down in order to be able to sustain the melody that you're called to, you should really, really not be afraid of that. Your team wants to be there, so lead them in what to do. Strong communication doesn't mean loud communication. It means predictable, clear communication. What are those opportunities that people on your team give you to communicate to them?
Let's hear it for David Pfaltzgraph.
Thanks, man. Hey guys, my name is David Pfaltzgraph, Flannelgraph, Pfaltzgraph is the best one I've gotten from telemarketers. It's a heck of a last name. I'm the owner of a company called Sunday Sounds. We make an app called Sunday Keys. Hey, thanks. We spend all of our time just obsessing over how we can empower the worship keys players in your church, right? My background is as a worship leader. I'm actually more of a guitarist than a keys player myself. Don't tell anybody. But I realized that I wasn't very good at empowering the keys players on my team. We were trying to sound like Elevation, sound like Bethel, and I didn't have the tools to communicate with them clearly. And I found a bunch of wrong ways to try and empower the keys players on my team, but eventually found some ways that worked pretty effectively too, and blah, blah, blah. I started this business by accident, and then here I am getting to talk to you guys today about how to fix communication breakdown. Now, funny story, Jake and I were talking via email maybe back in July. He said, hey, send me a couple keynote topics, some ideas, and then we'll sync up on it, we'll pick one, and then you can plan that talk. So I sent him a couple ideas in July, forgot that I had done that. He forgot to reply to me. We both forgot about it entirely until last week. And this is the one we picked. But the good news is I'm glad that it took until last week, because the way that this talk has come together is not the talk I was really thinking about when I pitched this title to him in July. So when we talk about communication breakdown, I'm really thankful that Will was right before me, because to me that was a master class in effective, proactive communication, right? That is rooted in skill, it's rooted in intelligence, it's rooted in care for the people that you're communicating with. But saying something, communicating something, being proactive in that way takes energy. It takes time, it takes experience, and the people that you're trying to communicate with have to be listening. So what can you do when that communication breaks down? Well, we're going to get into that. I'm going to share a few thoughts. But before that, I want to ask you guys to stand up. We're going to do a little experiment together. We'll see how this goes. It could go really well, really poorly, very little middle ground. Brace yourselves. Okay, now there's one really important thing here. I need to communicate this to you guys in the right order so that I don't screw it up. So I want you to now focus on me, ignore everyone else around you, okay? Just me, you and me, and you and me, nobody else in the room. It's just us. Weird, right? Okay, so you are going to sing Amazing Grace. Don't sing it yet. You guys are good. But you're going to sing it in just a minute. At whatever key, whatever tempo, whatever rendition is in your heart. Ask God to just tell you, God, how would you have me sing this right now? But it's just you and me in the room. No one else in the room. Okay? Just you, whatever the Lord is laying upon you. Top of your lungs, and I need you to just go for it. It's just you and me right now. Nobody else in the room, I swear. Don't stop looking around. It's just you and me. okay? If you need to plug your ears, that's fine, but it's just you and me. Ready? And I'm not going to tell you, like God's going to tell you what key. God's going to tell you everything you need to know, all right? So I'm just going to say go. And then it's just, God's going to handle it, baby. You guys are just going to kill it. Ready? Amazing Grace, your key, your tempo, go. God's saying stop. No. Okay, good. That was it. Sit down. Well done, I think. I'm not sure what just happened. You tell me if that was the good outcome or the bad. Okay, thank you for giving that a go. That went about like I thought it would. Okay, so when we talk about communication, the thing about it is that communication is always happening. Something is always being communicated. As humans, we're always seeing something, listening to something, observing something, or we're the ones communicating. Our body language communicates. So communication is always happening. How that communication is happening and whether it's intentional is what we can speak to, and that's where we can find room to improve. But first, there's a couple ways that communication can happen that might not be very intentional. Communication by omission. About a year ago, my team and I were getting ready to come attend a conference like this one. And a couple of the guys and I were going to drive. One of the guys was going to pick us up, and we were all going to drive to this conference together. And this is last year. I was coordinating all of the travel logistics and stuff. It was a few days before the event. So I texted him. I said, hey, man, what time are you guys going to swing by on Saturday so we can get there? And he said, Saturday? I thought we were leaving on Monday. And I just hadn't given him this important piece of information because I'm really bad at coordinating conference attendance logistics. This was communication by omission. I didn't have this specific, intentional, proactive communication. He figured it out. But it wasn't until that had been made plain. Communication by surprise. The people on your team that you're talking to, that you're saying things to, are going to figure out what you're getting across more often than not. Maybe they'll understand you fully, maybe they won't. I remember one time I had a drummer on my team who was really struggling to figure out a specific drum part. And I dabble in drums. And I said, well, hey, do you want me to just hop on the kit real quick and I can play the part for you? And he said yes. And I played the part. And then he left rehearsal because he felt like I'd really put him on the spot. He was really surprised at the contrast between what he was doing and what I was doing. And my intent was just to empower him with, this is the part as I hear it. But it was really shocking to him in that moment and really made him feel put on the spot. Communication is always happening. In those two cases, I wasn't being intentional. So what are some symptoms of communication breakdown? Low energy teams. Teams where folks, have this sort of shared commiseration about the difficulties of the role. And some of that can be, a helpful bonding. Like we work hard, working in tech, working in worship ministry, any sort of pastoral ministry is difficult, and that's fine. But if the overall energy on your team is low, there's a good chance that there's some breakdown in communication. Sluggish responses. And that could be, planning center, invitations for people serving. It could also just be in the moment when you're having these discussions with people. Do people have this confidence when they give you feedback or when they respond to your feedback? Or are you often finding that you're dancing around the thing you're actually wanting to address? Volunteer turnover. If you're having a hard time getting people to stick on your team, it's a really, really good indication that you might have some breakdown in communication. Decreasing velocity and increasing inertia. That's like a heady thing, but I couldn't figure out a better way to articulate this feeling of just like, as we're trying to grow, it's getting slower and harder. coming up against more things, more difficulty as we try and grow. And then open conflict, right? If you're having actual open conflict on your teams, whether that's passive-aggressive emails or if it's fights breaking out in the tech booth during Sunday morning or really ugly rehearsals, y'all know. But communication is always happening. So how can we make communication happen on purpose? And how can we communicate with purpose? So when we all did whatever we just did and tried to sing Amazing Grace like no one else was in the room, what was missing? We all knew the song. I told you the song. We're going to do Amazing Grace. We all knew the melody, right? Everybody knows the song. We didn't know the key, right? Everybody had their own idea of what the key was. Didn't know the tempo. And we each focused on our own voice. So, that was on purpose, right? It was supposed to be a train wreck. But I would imagine in ministry, for each of you, you found yourselves in those moments by accident, not in just this perfectly constructed little, let's all sound bad together for a minute thing, but where it actually didn't come together, when you realized, I've put so much effort into this, I thought I had it all laid out, and then people just didn't understand what I was trying to say. People took it the wrong way. The band didn't sound right. The lighting cues were off. I had this volunteer get offended and leave the church. Or maybe you are the one who feels like you don't know what key to sing in, what tempo to sing at. So, let's take a look at this for your teams. In this analogy, I'm a musician, artsy person. I'm going to use this analogy of music, of this melody, that song that we all attempted to sing. In your ministry, let God set the key. And these are the core fundamental things that's true of just why we're doing this in the first place. What is the core heart of your ministry? To bring people closer to Christ, to see them made right with God. And that's true of your congregation, yes, but also the people that you have been specifically planted near so that you can minister to them, the people that are actually serving on your team. God can set the key. And God can set the tempo. And in this analogy, tempo is actually quite literal. Sometimes you're going fast, right? Sometimes things are really, really, really happening quickly and you need to move to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And I would assume over the last few years, many of you have felt like the tempo is not sustainable. Sometimes the tempo needs to ramp down. Sometimes the key needs to go down a step because you've been singing at the top of your lungs for too long and you're going to lose your voice. God sets the key, God sets the tempo, and you have to listen directly in your prayer time, but also to people in your life that can speak to you, that can give you that insight on what key am I singing in? Am I singing in the right key? What's my tempo like? Does it seem hurried? Does it seem like it's dragging? These things can come from God, and that's what I'm believing for you guys. What's the melody for where you are at right now? Everybody knows Amazing Grace, but there's 100 different ways to sing it. Each person in this room has many lives that they impact directly. In ministry, in family, in community. And you each have, I believe, a unique melody that God has placed inside of you that's fundamental to who you are. You can call it a calling. What's your song to sing? What are you being called to communicate? And of course, that's the message of the gospel, right? That's Christ alive in us. But what does that sound like for you? What is your melody? And does that melody change from season to season? Maybe you're on the verse, maybe you're on the chorus, maybe you're on the bridge, maybe it's the down bridge. The The melody you're singing right now probably isn't the melody you were singing 4 years ago, and that's just the way that it is. Maybe that's because the people in leadership over you are asking you to sing a specific melody, to fill a specific role, and that's for a season. Maybe you feel stretched thin for a season. Maybe the melody is stretching you a little bit. Maybe it's hard for you to hit all the notes, but you're going for it, and you're asking God to support you in that. Other times, maybe you need to purposefully simplify that melody down. So when we talk about communication breakdown, when we talk about the melody that we're asking people that we're in leadership over to sing, we also have to, I think, first address what we are communicating, what melody we are bringing in a fundamental sense. And I'm kind of glad to be giving the last talk of the day because I just want to invite you guys to consider what your melody is right now. Just take a second and ask yourself, reflect. Am I being stretched? Am I ready to sing something with a chest voice, with more strength than I have before? Is it that fragile down bridge before things begin to build again? Is it the service opener at the top of my lungs? Just think about that for a minute. Ask God to speak to you to reinforce and strengthen that melody. And if you don't recognize it right away, ask Him to bring it to your mind, to bring it to your ear so that you can sing it, maybe like you haven't before. Just take a second. A simple, strong melody is better than a complex, weak one. And really, this is an echo of what Will said during his talk just before. If you need to simplify down in order to be able to sustain the melody that you're called to, you should really, really not be afraid of that. Try and lean into that. Figure out how you can communicate that clearly and with confidence, because it's more effective, it's more sustainable than a complex, weak version of that melody. So what are some signs of progress when it comes to repairing breakdown in communication? And at this point, really, this is what I meant when I said the talk I was going to give in July is not the talk I'm going to give today. This was meant to be really practical, really just team-focused on how to communicate more clearly with individual people on your worship team. But as I've been working on this talk, I've realized there's just as much work and conversation I'm having with worship leaders right now, face-to-face, that needs to be done with the ways that we communicate to ourselves, what we ask of ourselves, how we view our relationship to our ministry role, to the teams that we're called to minister and pastor. So, we're talking about communication with teams and communication with ourselves. So what are signs of progress? Volunteers, encourage each other. Call out each other's strengths. And for you, you need to be able to recognize your own successes. I guarantee if you're working diligently, if you're striving daily to serve God with your heart, there are successes that you could call out. And your volunteers encouraging each other in those things is a great sign of progress. Teams come more prepared. You move as a ministry, as a unit, with increasing velocity and decreasing inertia. So you're going faster when it feels like that's the right thing for you, and you're seeing fewer obstacles to overcome over time. And this is hard but rewarding work as you maybe rebuild lines of communication or build them up for the first time. And again, I think Will just gave such concrete examples of what it looks like to have language around the things that you know you need to communicate. Things that if you weren't prepared to communicate, you could spend minutes stumbling over your words, trying to find the right way, the right way, and we'll distill these things down to a sentence or a diagram. Now, of course, each context is unique. So the ways that you can distill that thing down, clarify that communication, we can learn from it and be inspired by others, but we also have to be willing to put in the work to bring that clarity in the ways we communicate with our own teams. I'm stealing this from the guy who co-founded Planning Center. It's a really cool guy named Aaron. He loves planning. He's very organized. And the first time I heard him say it, it just slapped me in the face because of how obvious it was. And I couldn't believe I'd never thought of it before. Your team wants to be there. And then he just kind of dropped the mic, in my opinion, right? Your team is actually volunteering to be there. So lead them in what to do. Your team wants to be there. I have found historically, if I'm not careful, I can be kind of cynical when it comes to dealing with people in teams that I lead, because I do have this top-down mentality of I have a plan for these things and a vision for it, and I'm hopeful that we can move towards these things. And if I'm not careful, I can get a little bit too logistically inclined and start viewing the plan instead of the people. And the people are maybe getting in the way of the plan just as much as they're actually the whole point, right? But your team wants to be there. Maybe not everybody. I mean, you got some volunteers that, might not want to be there, or they've got complicated reasons for being there. But in a general sense, love belief's the best. And in my life, I've found this to be true. Your team wants to be there. So lead them in what to do. So let's talk about going from breakdown to building up. You've got to have shared vision. And in this analogy, that's the key. What key are we singing in? What are we working towards? What's the fundamental thing that everything else is built upon? Shared vision. And you have to do this with shared speed. If you've got some people on your team who are just breakneck running, those hero volunteers that make everybody else look bad, maybe that feels good for a little while, but if they leave everybody else behind, they're always pushing everybody else forward, or if you're the one who's always dragging everybody behind you, or maybe you're out of energy holding everybody else back, it doesn't work. As a team, you have to share that speed, the tempo. And you have to have a shared goal. And I'm calling that the melody. What are the outcomes? What are we ending up creating together? What are we singing? What's the result? What does that look like? What's the melody for your tech team, for lighting, for sound, for the band? I guess literally the band, what's the melody? But also, metaphorically, whatever. What are you creating all together? What is it based upon? And then, complementary work. And this is where we get into harmony. If you're a part of a church in leadership, you are being impacted by at least one other person's team, right? If you're in the band, maybe you have that divide between front of house and the stage, maybe you don't. If you're in the tech booth, lighting, sound, video, all these things coalescing, or maybe not, maybe butting heads. But you can move towards greater harmony once you know the key, once you know the tempo, and once you know the melody. And when you start to lose sight of any of those things, then it gets exponentially more difficult for those teams to work together in harmony. But when you're just so specific about communicating the key, the tempo, the melody, and then the key, the tempo, the melody, and then listening, okay, the key, the tempo, and this subtle change in the melody because we're going somewhere new, then you can build towards harmony. Strong communication doesn't mean loud communication. It means predictable, clear communication. It could be loud if it needs to be. The melody could be shouted out at the top of your lungs. But sometimes that's not required. It does need to be predictable, and it does need to be clear. Predictable doesn't mean that people know what you're going to say before you say it, or you're just a broken record repeating the same thing over and over and over, and people can just ignore you. But it does mean that people on your team should plan to hear from you. They should think it's weird if they're not hearing from you. And there are great practical tools that we can use to communicate. We can use technology to bridge those gaps, but we can just also use a good old-fashioned coffee. Or just making sure we budget enough time during our rehearsals or our Sunday mornings to make sure we serve each other communion, or that we pray, or that we have these moments maybe after the service just to actually recap what happened and call out successes. Strong communication doesn't mean loud communication. It means predictable and clear communication. Just a second. Sorry, I lost my slides. I do have a horse. Yeah. Anybody know why I got all tiny? That's okay. We'll just do it tiny. I have a horse. It's true, I do. That's this horse. His name is Horsey. I didn't name him. I have 3 kids. My wife and I have been married 13 years. John, Wells, and Lillian. John is 8. Wells is 5. Lillian is 3. This is Wells's horse, 5-year-old. Named him Horsey. And anytime I go do a thing like this, he says, "Papa, take Horsey with you, and then it'll be like I'm with you, and you can think about me, and I'll think about you, and then when we get back, Horsey will be back with me too." So he always sends me with this horse. So anytime I go do these things, I always try and take pictures of me with Horsey and the things that I'm doing. And I'm going to do that. You guys have to let me take a picture of you and this horse. Here we go. All right, everybody look good. Smile. There we go. There's Horsey. He'll love that. Why do I have a horse? I mean, I just explained it. That's it. No, I'm kidding. The horse communicates something really specific to my 5-year-old son. It communicates that I have not forgotten him, that I take his small asks seriously, and that I'm coming back. Because the minute I get off this stage, I'm going to text it to my wife, and she's going to show him Horsey. And that communicates really clearly to him those important things. And he gave me the horse to communicate something really clearly to me. "Papa, I want you to come home. Papa, I'll miss you while you're gone," right? The horse is just an example, an object, a touchstone, and an opportunity for that clear communication to happen. If I forget to take that selfie, I'm missing an opportunity that he's given me for that communication. So I have a horse. You guys all have horses too. What are those opportunities that people on your team give you to communicate to them? Or maybe you don't know what that horse is in your team. Maybe you realize, crap, I don't have a horse. We don't have any horses built into our team dynamics. So I'd invite you to seek one out. You have to create these MacGuffins, these opportunities where it's like, wow, like if we don't do this, it's weird. If we don't have this moment, it's weird. This is an opportunity that exists purely for this purpose of there being an opportunity to communicate. I said at the very beginning, communication takes energy, it takes time, and it takes intention. If you're in ministry, sometimes you're short on energy. Sometimes you're short on time. Most of the time, you're short on time. And a lot of other people have intentions for what you need to do. Other people are asking you to do things, to serve. People in leadership over you, people in your congregation, people on your teams. So you've got limited energy, limited time, and you're not solely in charge of what you actually do, though you have the best intentions. So coming up with a horse, even if it's just 5 minutes of like, hey, let's just pray for each other at the beginning of each rehearsal. Sure, it would be great if we could run over that one song one extra time, but we've got to do this. It was making sure that whoever is behind the sound desk every Sunday morning always says into the mic, "Hey guys, it's Blake back here today, and I'm going to be running sound check for you," just to make sure that the people on stage actually know the person's name. So that if they need to ask something later, there's a little bit of a relational context there, and it's not just, "Hey, guy, I don't like something that's happening." But like those simple little horses, right? Of like, make sure that the different teams that are interfacing have at least one by name point of contact. Make sure there's small minutes of possible connection or communication built into the ways that you interact with your team. If you send out an email every week with information on the set list, that could be a horse, a small opportunity to just build in communication. Maybe that's just praising somebody on your team for something awesome they did the previous week. Maybe that's a prayer request. Maybe that's asking people to do something, reminding them to do something. But if you're not looking for those horses, and if you're not purposely maintaining them, then they just won't come, because you've got limited energy, limited time, and lots of people have ideas for what you should be doing. Click my last tiny slide. Yeah, let's try this again. Let's stand up. So God sets the key. God sets the tempo. In this example, I guess, crap. You guys get it though, right? I mean, we're doing this because we have a desire to serve. We have a desire to make our ministries more effective, to pastor our people well. And if anything, I hope that you have just felt during this talk encouraged that you are not the only person. Though I told you you were the only person in the room earlier, it's 100% not true. Every single person next to you, every heart represented in this space just proves that you're not alone in it. And I'm sure that you all have a unique context that you're going back to where there are communication challenges. Maybe you find yourself in the middle of breakdown right now, recognized some of those symptoms. Or maybe you find yourself short on energy, time. Maybe your melody isn't what you want it to be. Maybe you don't know the key that you're in right now. Whichever of those things is true, I guarantee you there's some other people in the room in the same spot. So we can all get together on the fact that we're just moving towards something, right? Moving towards greater unity with Christ. More effective ministry in our congregations, in our communities, with our families, and in our own personal relationship with God. So with the key and the tempo set, then we can actually make something a little bit more beautiful together. So my voice is a little raspy, this dry mountain air, but I'll give it a go. And then if you got the melody, that's great. If you got the harmony, bring it. Let's just give it what we've got, okay? So we'll sing it, Amazing Grace. Does it work for everybody? Okay, here we go. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. That's beautiful. Thanks, guys.